Leslie Marshall Show, a true democracy in talk radio. Of, for, and by you, the people.
Welcome to the third hour of the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine reporting live from the Center for American Progress in Washington. Got a great last hour for you. The first half, we're going to talk about immigration reform. And the last half, we're going to talk about a report that just came out of the Justice Department regarding Ferguson and the horribly racist, I don't know the word to say it, policing that goes on in Ferguson. You won't want to miss that as well. Stay tuned for the second half hour. But in the first half hour, let's talk about immigration reform. To Republicans, President Obama's plan is amnesty. It's rampant lawlessness. Our border needs security. And these people are coming across our border, and maybe they're terrorists, and I don't know, maybe we should all run and hide. To Democrats, they talk about the American dream, about the fact that we're almost all descendants of immigrants here in the United States of America, and that the people who are coming across the border now, for economic reasons, aren't so different from those that came across the border 20, 50, 100, 200, and 300 years ago. To help address who's right, I've invited D.S. Edwards. He's the author of the new book, Collective Retribution, which is about immigration reform, and he says he can help us sort through the propaganda and the hype. So, D.S., thank you for coming on the show and helping us do that.
Having me. How's the weather there in D.C.?
Well, we had a lot of snow yesterday, but today no more snow. It's beautiful, actually. Snow on the ground, bright sun, and it's very pretty the day after a snow. Then it gets all dirty and all. But for now it's beautiful. D.S., let me ask you this. In terms of immigration reform, let's first lay out who wants what, because there's a lot of misinformation that's going around. Tell us what the Democrats want, what the Republicans want, and then what Obama's executive order did, because it didn't go as far as what the Democrats wanted, even though the Republicans hate it. Lay out the three differences for us, please.
Well, when we're talking about immigration reform, first of all, you have to address what each side of the aisle hears. If you're in rural America, you hear the word immigration reform, you think about what your monologue, suggested that it's rampant. It's there's a bazillion people coming in. It's gonna kill the country. If you go to the other side of the aisle, if you're more urban or you're more progressive, you think it's poor oppressed families coming in wanting to make a better life for themselves and laying at the feet of the Statue of Liberty. So it depends on who you talk to, but I think the basicness of it is that we're a country founded and based on immigrants. I mean, the 80% of the population, they say, according to the immigration department, is first or second generation immigrants. So we're definitely a country built on the backs of immigrants. There's no doubt about it. We are the great
I've long said that only Native Americans or descendants of Native Americans have any right to complain about immigration. The rest of us just don't have a right to complain.
Yeah, I mean that's a fact, but there's also the fact that, and when I hear the word immigration reform, that's what I think of, that there's people that are here already, they're working, they're trying to grab their piece of the American dream, but what I'm more concerned about, the more immediate issue to me, is there is a security issue, and it's not about these families. It's not even about the trainloads of children that were coming, across the border. It's the issue of wide open borders, and it's not just the southern border. The northern border, I mean, it's mostly wooded, it's mostly remote. People can just walk right across. What concerns me is there's so much hate in the world right now. There's so much hatred. And, you're not going to fix that hatred. That's just the way the human nature is. There's hatred. But what concerns me is someone with an agenda to destroy large portions of our population can simply come right across that border right now that would not be that hard for them to get weapons of mass destruction across that border, particularly the southern border with the criminal element that's down there and the infrastructure they've already got set up for smuggling,
yes.
the tunnels, so on and so forth. So that's really an issue for me. Immigration's really not a problem, I don't think. I think what the main
let me ask you this.
Secure.
What concerns me is neither the southern border nor the northern border, nor even the eastern and western border, people arriving by sea. I'm concerned about the upper border. I'm concerned about people that arrive by air. Some half of all, I think maybe it's 40%, but it's almost half, of all the undocumented immigrants in the United States did not arrive by sea or by land. They arrived by air, including, dare I say, 19 men who on September 11, 2001 murdered 3,000 American citizens. They came, they overstayed their visas, as many undocumented immigrants do, and they stayed, they learned how to fly, and they had some pretty radical political ideas. To me, the whole idea of walling off our southern border, and as you point out, walling off our northern border is even harder to do. It's, in fact, the longest undefended border in the world by far. None of this, and building massive walls on our east and west coast, none of that will stop people flying in by air. It seems to me that it's not a physical barrier we need, but a better, security barrier or what's the word I'm looking for? A cyber barrier. In other words, I want us to know who's coming in and to follow them and ask them questions when they arrive at airports. And I mean that seems to me to be far more important than some fence somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I'm not talking a fence. I actually, you'd be surprised. I'm a conservative. First and foremost, but you'd be surprised at how much we actually agree on. I agree with that. I think there needs to be more focus and more money spent on infrastructure as far as security along the borders to keep those out, and more infrastructure spent on security on those who are coming in, and maybe a better vetting process on those who are coming in. But we have to address the security of our borders, whether it be a wall, like you suggested, might not work. That could help. But
first of all, I think we
really need to focus on infrastructure.
Yeah, I think a camera is cheaper than a fence, first of all, a lot cheaper. For one thing. And for another thing, I got to tell you that, and I think you can agree with me here, the vast majority of immigrants, including undocumented immigrants to the United States, well over 99%, come here not to harm this country, not to commit terror, not even to commit crimes, not even to deal drugs. Well over 99% come here for the same reason our ancestors come here. Mostly economic reasons, some political or religious reasons. They come here to live the American dream, to live in freedom, to make a better home for their families. That's why they're coming. The 19 terrorists could fit in that 1%. But 99% come here for reasons that are no different from our ancestors. Is that fair?
That's a fair assessment, but we can't turn a blind eye to the one out of a million that comes here and does harm.
Of course not. And I'll be the first to argue that if you're a drug dealer or if you have radical views, you oppose the United States, you're a member of ISIS. I don't want you in this country. It may be less than 1%, but sure, I'm all for keeping that 1% out. But when we talk about immigration reform, it seems to me that that's not the issue. President Obama agrees with Ted Cruz in keeping out that 1%. Where they disagree is on ordinary people, often from Mexico, though, again, that's only half or so. We have people from all over the world in this country who are coming into America to seek a better life for their kids. Those are the people that we're really talking about here. No one disagrees with keeping out the terrorists and the criminals.
Yeah, that's true, but we're spending so much time focusing on those that are already here rather than focusing on the issue of that 1%. I mean, the book that I wrote was based and was birthed out of a personal tragedy. My wife's baby sister, 19 years old, was murdered by a particular fella, cartel member, who had been deported 3 different times, and on the 3rd deportation walked back across the southern border and ended up killing everyone in an apartment building. Somebody owed him $37 for meth, and he went in and shot everybody. So, that's my own personal, and I wanted to write this book to wake up the people to the danger that's out there and to what could happen unless we focus on security. I mean, why don't we spend all that money we're spending in the Middle East on securing up and shoring our own country? Why don't we put our troops on the borders? Why don't we spend money on infrastructure? Instead, we're wasting all this time talking about the poor people that are already here. What about securing our country? That's really what I want to focus on.
Okay, fair enough, DS. And let me absolutely give my condolences to you and your family and your wife on the horrible murder of your sister. That's got to be a really painful thing. And I guess though when I hear that, I think to myself, yeah, some horrible Mexican immigrant did a terrible, cruel, awful thing. And then I look in Washington and I see some American citizen go into the Navy Yard with a gun, and I see in Colorado some crazy person go in with a gun that has a 100-bullet drum, and he thinks he's in the Batman movie. And I see Sandy Hook, Connecticut. I can name a whole bunch of instances where Americans, good old American citizens, have committed incredible murderous atrocities, as awful as the horrible atrocity that happened to your sister-in-law. And I guess my point is that issue to me makes me think about how can we keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the insane rather than it being a question of immigration reform. To me, the fact that he was a Mexican immigrant isn't the salient part of the story. To me, the fact that he was a cartel dealer and we weren't watching him, that's the salient part of the story, as opposed to it being a real immigration question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'd have to agree on that. That's the part of the story is the lack of security. I mean, there's hate everywhere. Like you said, there's
insanity. And insanity. I mean, just
there's hate and insanity everywhere.
Right.
We've got the jihadists who want to kill everyone who's not part of their faith. We've got the poor U.S. ambassador slashed in Seoul, Korea a couple days ago. I mean, for crying out loud,
I know.
Everywhere. That was horrible.
That was really weird, too. I mean, South Korea is a strong ally. We've been supporting South Korea against an incredibly dangerous country, North Korea, for, 60 years now. And it's just terrible. This guy came up to him out of nowhere, and I think it was an art show or an auto show, some common thing, and just slashed him in the face. So, yeah, there's kinds of crazy people everywhere. I would say that, thank God, in South Korea, they've got better gun control than we have in the United States, and he was only slashed with a knife rather than shot dead. It's not fun to be sliced with a knife, but at least you're still alive. But again, these are issues to me about the easy availability of guns. When we come back after the break, TS, I want to talk about specifically immigration reform and focus on the 99% of people who aren't criminals, who aren't terrorists, and have a real discussion about what we should do with them. Because in my view, they make America great just as generations of immigrants before made America great. I don't think Mexican Americans are any less hardworking, any less caring of their families than the generations that came before. I think they help this country. I say, unless they're criminals or terrorists, let them in. 888-653-7543. Back after this.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of truth. The Leslie Marshall Show. 888-6-LESLIE.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. My guest is D.S. Edwards. He is the author of a new book called Collective Retribution, about immigration reform, helping Americans sort through the hype and propaganda to learn on what the impact on their family and future generations will be. D.S., we've talked a lot about the terrible 1%, the terrorists and criminals and awful people that none of us want in this country. I'd like you to address the 99%. What do you think should be America's immigration policy toward people who just want to come here and live the American dream from all over the world?
You know, I know that according to the Immigration Office that close to 1 million people every year are allowed to immigrate to the United States. I mean, that's not all naturalized citizens. I mean, that's some with a green card, some that work here. But that's close to 1 million people, so that's a pretty good-sized number, and they go through the process. They come in, they, get their documentation, and they do it the right way. And, yes, we know there's an element who hasn't done it the way that our laws have been set up. But my question actually is, I don't know what to do as far as what should the number be. What do you think as Mark Levine, the well-respected talk show host, what should the number be? Because obviously, as a nation, we can't absorb an unlimited amount of people here. Some of them are going to contribute, but some of them aren't. What can our infrastructure, what can our society, what can our financial deficit, what can that handle? What should that number be? Should we
I'll
put
tell you
a
this.
limit on the amount?
Prior to the 1920s, prior to World War I, we had no limits whatsoever on immigration. That's when my ancestors came in the late 1890s, and many, many Americans came at that time. The only restrictions were, you had to be in good health, and you had to not, want to overthrow the U.S. government, and you got in. And my great-grandfather was dirt poor. I know he had $20 to his name because it's on the Ellis Island Manifest, which I found, and I would say my family's done pretty good here. We've done very well. Look, I think if you look at the most recent recession, you found, and this surprised a lot of people, that some of the immigrants, for example, that came across the border from Mexico, couldn't find jobs in 2008, 2009, and went back to Mexico. If people are coming here for jobs and a better life, and I think they largely are, and the infrastructure, the jobs aren't there, they'll turn around and go home. It seems to me that what happens is they come here, they work hard, then they create their own jobs, and they make room for more people. I don't think this country's full. I don't think we're, like Singapore, a whole bunch of people living on a tiny island. We've got vast areas of this country that are wilderness. I mean, Montana, Nebraska, I can name a whole bunch of states. They got plenty of room in it. As far as I'm concerned, we can open our borders a lot wider. Again, no terrorists, no criminals, and things like that. But I would argue that immigrants actually create room for more immigrants. So to me, 1/3%, which is 1 million people out of a 300 million people country, we were getting 12% growth 100 years ago. We can go a lot higher than 1/3 of 1%. I would start with 2% or 3%, see how it goes, and maybe even increase it more after that. But you and I may disagree on that.
Yeah, I think possibly we do, and there's a couple other issues that come into play when you talk about that. You talk about the vast open land and the vast wilderness. I prefer to leave that untouched. I prefer to not drain the natural resources and to not put more of a strain on our earth and our ecosystem. I mean, I'm sure you're a guy who's very concerned about climate change or global warming.
I am, but let me say this first.
How much can our environment handle if you want to go to the
fair enough. Let me say this. I in some ways I overstated this because you and I both know most immigrants go to urban areas anyway.
Exactly.
So that's a fact. But here's the thing. If